Welcome back. In Module 2, this is theme video 2, and again, we're talking about the nature and components of learning targets. And so even though this video is about assessment, it's about how we use assessments properly to match to learning targets. Without further ado, as you know, I like to keep these short, so let me get to the PowerPoint I have prepared for you. Leading instruction and assessment. This again, we're talking about design, sound design. Assessment design is what we're talking about. This is about developing quality assessments. This doesn't mean that your assessment isn't good. What it means is it needs to match the learning target. So when we talk about 4 aspects of sound design, and by the way, I should have put that in red. That is an issue, a question that comes up on the final. And of course, you can always, since it's a take-home test, you'll be able to look back at the PowerPoints to answer your questions. 4 aspects of sound design. The assessment matches the learning target. This is really important because I'm going to tell you a true story, and it's going to seem weird, but I'm going to give an example of a PE teacher one I had. I have a number, but I like this one because it really gets the point across. He was doing a skills target, something where they had to learn to do something, actively do it. When the time came to assess it, he gave a multiple choice test. In this case, I think it was because it was simply an easy way to grade it. And he was struggling because the results, he says, when I have them do it, they do it right, but they answer it wrong on the multiple choice test. I asked him why he was giving a multiple choice test, since doing was what the learning target was focused on. Did they do it? Yes. Then evaluate the doing of it. That's an extreme example, but please make sure you think about, how do I assess? Is it the simplicity of grading? Give a true-false test for a reasoning, true-false test on a reasoning target, or do I do a target where they have to, a reasoning target where they have to write something out that shows they reasoned about it? So think about how it matches the learning target. Simple represents the learning appropriately. Again, word problem. Multiple choice doesn't appropriately show the student learning on a skill. Okay. Scoring rubrics. Now, this is important because you may not use rubrics regularly, but on this assessment, the assignment you have this week, you're going to have to give a rubric, and it's going to be like in the format of the examples I have that well, not examples, they're the ones I use for scoring your work, the rubrics. It's not something that says you can get up to 5 points for this or something like up to 3 points. That's not a rubric. A rubric has 3 components, okay? The categories, exemplary, proficient, okay, the indicators, all right, that is the student did this, and this, student did that, and that, and then the criteria. What are you measuring? Understanding, knowledge, ability to write, ability to present, those things. So please make sure you're thinking in terms of rubrics when you do your assignment. And avoid bias. That's a tricky one, but generally you don't see that. That's usually the way you word questions, okay? Not true-false questions, because true-false questions want a specific answer. Multiple choice want a specific answer. We're talking about ones like reasoning, where you want them to give the way you want it to be seen, rather than to have them think about it and process it. This is just real quick, so that you know when we use the term reliability. Reliability means the test is written well, so that when I give the test, I'm going to get the results that I should be getting. Okay. It doesn't mean that every time I give the test to the same student, they'll get the same score. But what it means is that my rubric is right. I'm measuring right. I'm not one time getting everyone this way, and then the next time everyone that way and this way. Reliability usually ends up something, tricky. Validity means it measures what it's intended to measure. So, for example, a multiple choice test on a skill target is not valid. And so the idea is it doesn't measure what it's supposed to measure. Now, what are the types of assessments? You're probably familiar with this. You've seen it 100 times. By the way, it's in red. That means it's part of the final exam. Okay. Formative are tools that evaluate how they're doing. They are meant so that you can adjust instruction or give added supports to students. Summative are what you were looking for the grades. Please note, summative can be formative. In other words, you give a unit test. At the end of the unit, I finished chapter 5. I'm starting chapter 6. Chapter 5, when I evaluate that gives the grade. I have that grade in the grade book, but I noticed that the students all seem to be missing one section or doing poorly in one area. I can use that and incorporate it into chapter 6 somehow. Now I'm using chapters as a simple way, but you probably using units and other things. Two in red, actually all 4 in red, because there is a question on the final exam that says, what are the 4 types of assessments? Okay, selective response, written response. Assignment requires that you pick an assessment that meets one of these 2 categories. In other words, if for your project this weekend, this paper for this week, you give you're writing that the assessment for this is going to be a multiple choice. It won't work because multiple choice is not a performance of personal communication. And I'll show you that. This PowerPoint is up for you to review. By the way, I talked about this in a previous video, this target method chart. It's uploaded module 2. It helps you when you see a word in the target, what might be a good way of measuring it. So selective response, these are the ones we know really well. They are just strictly for knowledge purposes. Multiple choice, true, false, matching, fill in the blank, okay? This is really good way to see if students know facts or how to measure specific elements that they should have know rotely, okay? But the problem is response items are usually graded right or wrong. Partial credit's not possible. So I'm going to give you an example why I was guilty of this. I used to have a multiple choice test. I was a math teacher. A student can work out the entire problem and forget something like a negative sign in one place. And if he forgets that negative sign, it throws off his answer. He does every step right, with the exception of that one forgotten negative sign. He gets the wrong answer. He puts it in and he gets the whole problem wrong. If I had given a different type of assessment where I could see him where he wrote out the whole problem, oh, I see the negative sign missing, I'll take a couple points off because he did all the steps right and made that one mistake. So he got partial credit. Written response, that's the type I'm talking about in math where they solve out the problem. There's short answers, extended written responses, that could be a reflection paper, things like that. They're a strong way to measure both knowledge and reasoning because I can have knowledge questions. They don't have to all be short. They can be short answers. They don't have to be multiple choice or something like that. So it does also help me find out if they can relate to things or infer or compare and contrast. So they're really good for reasoning. But of course, it doesn't measure a skill. And this goes back to, again, where I want to see if a student can shoot a basketball and I have them do a paper about it. Now, with that said, you can give a written response about what are the key elements of shooting a basketball properly. So the student writes about, well, you must have the proper form. You must have that. So it doesn't mean that for a skills thing that you can't have them write about components of it and show that they understand key components. Remember, we talked about this in targets. They build on each other. Knowledge, what is a free throw? Reasoning, why would you do it? The skill, actually doing it. So these are things to think about as you build this. And then performance assessments, and I mentioned this, I said this is the oldest, and again, that goes back to the skills. They align to it. They demonstrate a skill. So they actually have to build something. They actually have to shoot a basketball. In artwork, they have to do something. I had it, believe it or not, in my geometry class, I would have students do a project and then present about it. In a sense, that was their performance is they created the product and then gave a explanation of it. So a performance assessment would be something like speech, debate, okay, in addition to things like the music, doing a performance or play or something like that. So the thing typically used with performance assessments, when you're doing it as a teacher, it helps us plan instruction. So when I see where they're struggling, differentiate instruction. So I allow different students to take different things. One may choose to do a presentation, give a speech. One may choose to produce a YouTube video. So I allow that. Gives me a chance to offer feedback to the student. I see you did this. Why did you not? Did you consider this? Okay. It can also be a summative assessment. Okay. So remember, performance assessments I like because they give you multiple opportunities to work with the student. Okay. Here are the pros and cons. I'm not going to go into those. They are somewhat limited in some senses of measuring knowledge. I know that sounds weird, but more so they're used for higher level things. And then personal communication. This is predominantly used to measure reasoning in learning targets. And I'll give you an example. I had students once, I did this as a math teacher. I gave a problem on the board. And instead of having them solve the problem, they had to write a letter to a friend explaining how to solve it. To me, what I wanted to see is, could they explain the processes and why they did each step? Not just they did each step, but why they did it. So it allowed me to measure their knowledge, that they were able to do it, and their reasoning, why they chose to take that, why I chose the opposite, why if it was -2, I added 2 to both sides. So there are other ways of doing this, question and answer. Oral exams are actually personal communication. So if you have a student come up and you assess them doing orally, that's personal communication. Class discussions, interviews, oral exams don't all have to be oral. You can see there's journals and logs. I gave an example where I had the students write a letter to a friend. Personal communication is a valid method for measuring bonds. And so again, I will say this, it seems obvious you wouldn't use personal communication for measuring the product learning targets, but I will say this, you can combine them. They do a product, so you measure the product, and then they explain how they did the product, so you can measure that as another assessment, so you test their reasoning skills. So with all that said, I hope this got you thinking a little bit more about why you do the assessments you do, how you align them. I think really for this course, though, it's more about leading. How do you help others understand these things? So it's not just about you. It's not like, do I do these? It's like, oh, I noticed so-and-so doesn't do that. Maybe I can help them with that. As always, I hope this instilled something in your mind to think about or process, or how I might do something differently. Until then, blessings.